All right, we got some intro music today. We're here at Killer Vintage Specialty Guitars in Dallas, Texas, with the one and only Holland K Smith. How you doing, Holland?
I'm doing great.
Well, what brings you to this neck of the woods? Could it be?
Yeah, it's the Gretsch. I came over just to pick this up. I'm gonna have to hold a bunch of people hostage and keep guns on them while I walk out with it. But this guitar is mine. I'm going. Just I got to figure out some way to accommodate to get it.
Well, I'm sure you have enough guitars you could trade for this.
Yeah, everything I own I could probably trade and get this one guitar.
So, only 3,200.
Yeah, and it's made in Japan even. Nice guitar. Love to have it. Boys and girls, this is what Daddy wants for his birthday. So anybody that's out there wants to drop $3,200 in a birthday present for me, this is what I want. Huh? That's right.
Well, speaking of guitars, where did it all start for you?
This morning about 9:30 I woke up and I went and had some coffee and then, no, I'm just kidding. I got, this question has been answered a million times, but I started playing in 1969, I got my first guitar. And I haven't played every day since then, but I've managed to keep one in the corner all these years. And I think I was telling somebody the other day, if I'd have known how long it was going to take to get me where I am now, when I started playing when I was like 10, I would have never kept it up. You know, it's just one of those work things. You just keep working at it. And a buddy of mine, I take lessons still occasionally, and it's like opening up an onion. You know, music is. You just keep finding new stuff to play and learn. But yeah, I mean, I started playing '69, and then I did a lot of stuff. You know, just sitting around the room for the first probably 10 years. I got in my first band at about, I think I was 19 or 20, and then by the 80s I was playing out a little bit. I was in a rock and roll band and going through all that during the 80s, and then I discovered blues through a coworker. I didn't discover it, but I just discovered that you could actually be a blues head. And I discovered that's kind of what I wanted to do. Around that time, I'd heard my first Anson Thunderbird album and my first Jimmy Vaughn album with the Thunderbirds, you know, back in the early stuff, man, when they were still performing around here in the clubs. And, and that I was sold on that. And then started hanging out in the Dallas blues scene. I ran a blues jam at the old Schooners. A lot of Dallas folks would remember that club. It was the mecca for all the blues people in Dallas, and a lot of famous people came through there. I was lucky enough to land a Monday night jam there, and I actually answered an ad that I saw from Top Cat Records, and it needed new music or new artists, and that's how Richard and I first met, through an ad in the newspaper.
And we're of course talking about Richard Chalk.
Yes, and I think that the genius behind Top Cat Records, Richard, and then the next thing you know, I was lucky enough. He was kind enough to get me on his very first CD for the label. It was a compilation of a bunch of Dallas artists, I think, and mostly Dallas artists. And then I ended up doing one or two more records after that with Top Cat, yeah. And that put us in about mid '90s when that was going on, and I got my foot in the door in a market in Europe and in Brazil. Another thanks to Richard for getting me exposed down in South America, and was fortunate enough to be able to do some tours down there. It was really cool, and since then I've done multiple tours all over and played in a lot of countries in Europe and in South America and a lot of states across the United States. I haven't played every state, but I played most of them. I do remember Thailand, man. Yeah, that's another thing. Richard took us over there with the label for a big tour for 3 weeks in Thailand. That was one of my first forays into the musical tour business, and boy, I tell you what, talking about baptism by fire, man. Yeah, that's like a whole another chapter. That thing was a crazy. It all started out by my bass player calling me before we were leaving for the airport and said, "Man, I can't do this show. My wife won't let me." And as a band leader, that's probably the thing that makes you the most angry, is to hear something like that, especially when you've got a $2,000 ticket and you're ready to give it to him and him get on the plane with you, and he's saying now he can't go, and it's like 2 hours before you leave. So we hit the ground running in Thailand to find us a bass player. But
I can appreciate that.
yeah, it's just how it works in this business.
Yeah, well, I got a call from Smokey Law one night, and he said, "Do you want to join the band?" I went, "Well, okay." He says, "Good, pack your bags. We'll be by at 6 in the morning for a 3-month Canadian tour."
Well, that's how it was, man. I called several people and out of desperation, please, can you help me out here and leave, like you say, can you go for 3 weeks and leave in 3 hours,
Right.
And of course all I got was just
Well, I'm gonna back you up a little bit. You've got this beautiful Gretsch White Falcon in your hands.
I
here.
do, man. It's guitar porn right here, buddy.
And you started in '69, somewhere around there, right?
Yes.
Playing. What was your first guitar? Do you remember?
It was a Japanese knockoff of a Hummingbird, a Gibson Hummingbird. And I wish I'd never gotten rid of that guitar. It was stolen. And but I had that thing forever, man. The brand was Prairie, and I would give anything to find another one like it, but I haven't been able to locate one. Just a fairly inexpensive guitar. It was purchased for me by a friend of mine that had actually inspired me to, an adult friend of mine that had actually inspired me to pursue guitar. And in those days, we were listening to, obviously, there was all these great guitar players out. I mean, the Glenn Campbell show was on television, and Chet Atkins was making special appearances everywhere. And my mom had all of Chet Atkins albums, and Glenn Campbell was on the radio, and both those guys right there probably influenced me to keep going and really want to buckle down and try to figure out how it worked. And then I started, peeling the onion back, as my guitar teacher says, and you just start discovering more and more guys. You start, as I got older, I started wanted to know who these great guitar players were listening to themselves. I started figuring out, hey, I guess they've got to be sitting around listening to stuff.
Right.
What are they listening to? Like Stevie Ray. I mean, what is he listening to? So you start doing looking at interviews with them like I'm doing now, and you find out the guitar players that they were interested in. Now that I'm older and I know more about guitar styles, I can go back and listen to Chet Atkins, and I can hear all kinds of influences in that guy's playing that I didn't understand when I was younger. I mean, you can hear Django all through Chet Atkins playing, Django Reinhardt, for example. And he actually mentions Django several times. I don't know if he got to meet him or not, if he played with him. I know Les Paul did, I believe.
He did.
But and Django actually gave him a Selmer French guitar. But nonetheless, obviously the first influences, were Chet Atkins and all the rock guys. I was listening to the Beatles and the Stones. I for some reason I leaned towards the Beatles. It's probably because I was younger and they were more pop. But I'm still a huge fan of the Beatles and stuff. And they were, and then I had a friend of mine that he was pretty spoiled when he was growing up, and he was an only son, and so his parents gave him in like 1970 they gave him a brand new Gibson 335 with all the bells and whistles and the Bigsby and all that stuff, And here's a couple of 10-year-olds sitting there with this guitar, you know, trying to figure out how do we get that sound out of it? How do we get this? How do we do that? I mean, you know.
Probably playing through super reverb.
You know, and 40 years later, I figured out how to do it, man. It's pretty cool. It didn't take any time.
So you started off with rock and roll.
Yes, obviously, you know, white guy growing up in suburbia, yes.
Now, how did you make the transition to blues?
Well, like I say, in the 80s, I discovered that there was like this this scene under the surface around Dallas-Fort Worth, especially in Dallas. I had a friend of mine that I worked with, and he had introduced me to the Thunderbirds. At that time, they were on the radio. They were just getting started, and I was knocked out. You know, I never heard anything so cool. I'd obviously been exposed to. I mean, when I was, like I say, in '69, I think, or maybe '70, B.B. King's "Thrill Is Gone" was on the air. I mean, it was mainstream, and it was a hit. You know, and I always used to get angry with the DJs because the coolest part of that song to me is when it's fading out and he's doing all the call and answer stuff and they've got violins of all things on it. And they start fading out, and the DJs would always come in and start talking over that fade out.
Yeah.
I'd want to go down to the studio and just wring their necks. You know, you shut up and let that song finish. I want to hear that ending part. But you know, up till then, about all I'd ever heard of was B.B. King and Freddie King, and I was knocked out by those guys. But I had no idea where to start with that music. And then I started following Anson around, and I became a huge Anson Thunderbird fan, and the gal I was married to at the time, we started going to every concert. When he was in town, we were there. And that's how I met him.
Well, he produced Cobalt, your album Cobalt, which
Yeah.
I love, by the way.
No,
I
thank
think
you.
it was the best album of that year.
Oh, thank you, man.
I mean
Appreciate
that sincerely.
Yeah, that album did real well. I was real happy. It made Album of the Year in a couple of markets. That one up in Canada, and I think one down in Australia, a radio station, they dubbed it CD of the Year. Yeah, I had a lot of luck with that
Well
song.
deserved. Well deserved.
I came real close to hitting a Grammy with one of those songs too. I was third in line. People talk about, you know, well, he's Grammy nominated. Well, that's really pretty easy to get. On the other hand, to get to the finalists is a little bit tougher. And then I was told about that, and I couldn't believe it. I was up against Lurie Bell and Kim Wilson for Best Song, and Lurie Bell took it that year. That was what was that? What is now? It's 2014, I think, is when that was.
Which song off the Cobalt?
It was Love Liquidation.
That was first cut. It reached out and grabbed
Well, I
me.
got a call actually from one of the Grammy judges, and he was not happy. He'd said that they'd all decided. He had been in touch with all the other judges, but they overrode me and let Lurie Bell take it, which was okay. I came real close to getting the bullseye, so hopefully this next CD I'll get one.
Well, we're all enjoying Cobalt,
Well, thank you,
whether
man.
you won that or not.
Yeah, well, I'm working on another one, so it's been 3 years now, and it's way past time for me to be putting out another one. So I'll be doing that.
I love the
This year.
innocence. I love the innocence of the working the songs of that era, of an earlier era.
I'm sorry. Now, what was the question?
The innocence. Well, I'm just saying, I love the innocence of some of those songs from that '60s kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
And
sure.
how I felt it was true to the song, the
Right.
lyrics.
Yeah. Oh, you mean I'm talking about on my CD or?
Yeah, on your CD.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. You never know when you put something out about how it's going to turn out. I mean, a lot of those songs though end up. What was cool about it, because sometimes they take on their own life in the studio. But on many of the songs on Cobalt, they turned out exactly like I heard them in my head, you know. So that's cool. I was on the Eller Soul label out of Virginia, and those people are really nice over there. They really take care of me. They let me pretty much have full artistic, what they call artistic control. And I don't know if you know anything about the history of that phrase or term. Clapton, for example, he went halfway, maybe a little farther than halfway through his career before he was able to land a record deal that they gave him full artistic control. They would come in, up till then, at that point, the producers would come in, or the big wigs would come in and say, Eric, we love this, but we want you to go in another direction, or we want you to drop that song, it doesn't go. So he wasn't allowed to completely call the shots. But so that's was a hard-won victory for him. And when I walked in at Eller Soul Records, they let me have full artistic control. They said, you just do what you do, and let us listen to it, before you send it to the master. Great.
Really?
Beautiful, yeah.
That is totally
exactly. So I consider myself real lucky to kind of stumble in a situation. Actually, Anson introduced me to those people, and so yeah.
And what guitar and amp, besides your new guitar right here that you'll be picking up today?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So that I'm somehow going to walk
Birthday
out of here
present.
with. Maybe I may have to go get a pistol or something to get out of here with it. Can you believe how fancy this thing is? I mean, it's got, I don't know if you can see it, boys and girls, on television out there in television land. It's got sparkly binding, and they even put sparkly binding inside the F-holes. I just don't see how it could be any fancier.
No.
I really don't.
But what are you playing on stage now?
These days, I'm using my old standby, my 64 Super Reverb. That's my favorite. It's a little bit too much amp for a lot of the shows I do. I use a couple of scaled down amps if I'm going to be playing in a lower volume situation. These days, my go-to guitars are Stratocasters. I've got a couple of them that I carry around. That's just simply because they're real roadworthy. I mean, I've seen a Stratocaster be thrown down the street, and you go down there and pick it up, tune it back up, and it continues to play great. The hollow body guitars, I've already broke a couple of them. They're real bad about snapping the headstock.
Right.
And that's the most sickening sound in all of the world, is I hear that headstock snap. And
It has a long snap,
unfortunately, been privy to that sound 2 times in my life, and it's not pretty. But anyway, I have an Epiphone, a big one, and I used to carry it, and then I won't mention any names, but a buddy of mine came down one night, and he's a real good guitar player, so that's why I let him play this big, huge, beautiful guitar that I have. I figured the guy would take care of it for me, and I turned my back, and it came off the straps and hit the ground, drove the input up into the body of the guitar, and so I started kind of thinking maybe I'd start playing something that's a little more sturdy.
Was that an inspiration for a song for you yet?
Not yet.
Yeah. Speaking of
It's hard to
songs,
tell that story without exposing who it was, and I'm sure right now the guy felt terrible about it. I'm sure
not
right
gonna
now
ask.
that was 15 years ago. I'm sure the guy right now is somewhere out there. He's getting red in the face from watching this video.
we won't say the name.
No, we won't.
But speaking of that, as far as the songs, what's your songwriting method? What moves you to write? What does it take in your surroundings to be able to write? What are your motivations?
Well, it's just different, I mean, it's hard to describe exactly what that is. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's hard to describe the inspiration and stuff. It comes and goes like the tide. It comes and goes like clouds. You never know when it's going to hit you, and your only hope is to have something close by. You can write it down before it gets away. And then there's songs that I've worked on over a period of time, some years, and they
Right.
just never really happen. But I, for some reason, keep wanting to do something with this idea that I have. But some of the best songs I've written, and I've heard this before, they just came at the last minute, and they were coming out so fast, I literally couldn't write the stuff down fast enough. Inspiration, it comes in all forms. It just depends, man. It depends on my mood. Usually I think I write, usually I've discovered that I do the best writing in the early morning when I first get up. And I've heard that before. You feel the best, your mind is clear, you're not full of all the thoughts for the day, and I don't know what it is, maybe it's because you feel physically better, your mind's clear, but I'm always inspired that's the first thing I got to do in the morning is get a cup of coffee, a cigarette, and guitar. Right. And I have to spend an hour at that. If I can do that, then I'm set for the day. I don't always get to do that, but that's my ideal morning, is getting up and running through some stuff for an hour or so on the guitar.
Before the chaos starts.
Before the chaos starts, that's right. Before I get on the phone and start begging people for jobs, for gigs. What's that?
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean,
So do you know where these songs are going when they come to you? If there's some that really hit you, do you know where they're going to be on the other end, or is it always a surprise?
sometimes I have a set vision on how it ought to do, and then other ones you just, you never know how they're going to turn out. Some of them end up going a direction that I would have never thought would have gone. But luckily, you stay in this, if you play guitar long enough, you come up with enough little licks that you can get through a whole night without playing the same thing twice. So luckily I've been at it long enough to where I've got ways that I can approach. If we come up with a new idea, I can adapt my playing to go that different direction. Now, sometimes it's hard when you've got an idea in your head to let go of that concept and allow it to kind of grow. But yeah, I mean, I don't know where I was going with that, but
Well, it's just like
You
writing.
know,
You
I'll tell
don't
you-
always know where you're going to go.
right, exactly. It's hard to describe songwriting. I read an interview with Roger Miller, and he said, they asked him the same question. He said, the best way I can describe writing a song, and it really is true. Roger Miller was a really funny guy.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about his history, but he was a great songwriter. And he said, writing a song, he says, it's hard to explain. He says, the best way I can explain it is you see an old cat. An old cat goes under the house, and in a few hours, it comes out with some kittens. I don't exactly know what happens, but that's what happens. And that's kind of how songwriting is, The cat disappears under the house, and a few hours later, there's some kittens.
Funny.
But it really is a great way to describe songwriting.
You certainly make this sound good. What amp is that playing through?
It looks like a Fender.
No, oh,
Is it an old Pro?
Richard, which amp is that?
I don't know. It's an old Fender. It's a little one.
Yeah, sounds good. What amp is that? Fender what?
It's a
Champ?
concoction of Kurt Linhoff's. It was a 54 Deluxe that Kurt Linhoff turned into something.
Oh, so it's got different
Frankenstein.
guts in it. Well, it sure sounds good,
And
man.
it's a great sound amp. It's not,
It really is.
It started its life as a 54 Deluxe. It's no longer that.
Now, what kind of payment plans could you work out for somebody like Holland K Smith? That's what we want to know.
I could probably pay it off in about 30 years.
We'll take furs, gold dust,
Okay.
sometimes used cars.
Well, you want to talk to us about your band? Who do you
Not
have in the
particularly.
band? Okay, we don't.
No,
have to.
no. The band guys. I'm really blessed to have these great players in the band right now, and it's real fluid. You never know when the whole thing's going to fall apart or somebody's going to drop out, and I'm always going through that. But right now I have Jimmy Pendleton on drums.
Good drummer.
I've got Rio Casey out of Dallas on bass. He's a great young guy, and it's really cool to have him. He kind of brings a freshness to the whole thing. And then I've got gentleman John Street on piano. He played with Anson for years and played with Greg Allman. So I'm real lucky to have the guys on board that I do. And we travel as much as I can get us going without any help from any booking agents. I'm doing it all myself. But I've managed to get a pretty good market happening in Houston. So
Really?
I go down there quite a bit, yeah. Yeah,
And-
we've got several places to play down there, and enough to keep us busy for a weekend, so.
Continental or electro bands, or where are you playing down there in Houston?
We've got a show coming up at Big Easy, which is in the kind of a little bit south of downtown. That's one of the coolest bars in all of Texas. It's kind of a hidden gem. I tell you who hangs out there on a regular basis. Billy Gibbons hangs out there. I looked up one night. I was playing in there, and he was about from here to that wall right there watching me play. You talk about getting nervous, man. But
Well, you would have been nervous if you had this, because I'm sure Billy would have grabbed.
well, he might. He's probably got a dozen of these. That you know, he's probably got some that he's like to get rid of. Knowing Gibbons, he's got an arsenal. Well, he's got warehouses full of them, I think, from what I've understand.
Put a little mohair on it and let it roll.
Right.
So, coming up for the rest of the year, any tours in particular, or you just
We've
sticking
got
around the
a
house?
big festival coming up out in New Mexico in October, and that ought to be a pretty good deal. And we got some short little tours. I'm going down to Southwest Texas in July, and mostly until then it's Houston and Dallas dates, Fort Worth and whatnot. We may have some stuff up in Kansas later on this summer or in the early fall, so we'll just see what happens. I'm doing most of the booking myself, like most everybody else. So really, you see people out there playing, and they say, "Oh, you must be doing really good. You must be a great musician." It's like, no, I'm just happen to be pretty good at booking the shows, and that's or at least it appears that I'm good at booking the shows. It's pretty tough. Everybody knows it.
Well, I want to take lessons from Smokey Law, Will Smokey Law, on booking.
Oh yeah.
Because he used to book us for months at a time on the road, and we were playing at least 5 nights a week.
Yeah.
And that was before cell phones.
Right.
That was before computer stuff.
No, I was doing it back then. It was tough, man. I mean, I was telling my daughter, she didn't believe it, but Facebook is a godsend for guys like us, man.
Sure.
I remember I used to hand draw a calendar on an 8x10 postcard, and I would have a bunch of them printed off and send those out. 500 of them. I'd spend several hours every month, drawing that calendar up, hand drawn. It wasn't done with a computer, and then with all our dates, and then stamping them all when you had to lick the stamp, and then putting their address on there. And I had managed to find. No, I hand wrote the labels in the original days. I hand wrote the labels, like 500 of them.
Right.
I was sending out,
That was truly an art to be able to do that.
Huh?
That was truly an art.
Yeah, I mean,
To be able
you just
to
did
book-
what you had to do. I didn't think anything of it. Things have changed now, though. It's a lot easier. The only thing is that I think the gigs have gotten less and less. There's not a lot of work nowadays during the week, and that's kind of like the bread and butter of the touring, man. I mean, the weekends are great. Money's pretty dang good sometimes, but man, it's sitting around, for a week waiting on the weekend. I mean, and I was looking at a calendar of mine from way back in the early '90s, and I noticed on there, man, we were working 5, 6, 7 nights a week, man.
Right.
I mean, it was that cool. There was a lot of during the week stuff, but
I just remember when I was with Smokey,
yeah.
it was all about being on the road, because you got paid on the road. It was hard to get paid any kind of decent gig money when you had so many talented people in Dallas who were willing to come out and play for next to nothing. It made it very difficult.
It's not so much that they're playing for nothing. It's the fact that the buyers, they just take all that for granted. You start thinking about let's just say in the last 10 years of the successful musicians that are coming out of this area.
Right.
I mean, there's tons of them. And they all say, "Oh, he's from Austin." Well, actually, he moved from Dallas.
Right.
Gary Clark, Stevie Ray, they all did that. A lot of those guys think going down to, and it may be true. You may have to move to Austin to have success in this business, but I've never had to do it. I've seen a lot of guitar players move down to Austin and come back really skinny.
They either come back skinny or they end up in Nashville.
Yeah, that's
Very
right.
good.
I just heard this guy for the first time. Speaking of great artists, I heard this guy for the first time. This Charlie Crockett guy.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my gosh, he's a talented individual.
Yeah.
And he's one that's coming out of this area. What a great player, man, and singer.
And Americana,
Yeah.
all unique stuff that you don't hear much anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a whole nother deal. You know, a lot of that's based. It's crazy. They used to call what they're calling Americana now is country music.
Right.
But see, the guys that are older than us, they don't understand, because back in the day, I just figured this out in the last year or so. Back in the day, they didn't call country music country. It was called old time music.
Really?
Yeah, that's right. Back in the Grand Ole Opry days, they called it old time music. That's exactly right.
Driving nails in my coffin.
Yeah.
The new CD, tell me about that.
Well, it's still in the building stages. I've gotten a couple of rough tracks down for it. We're still working on songs. But we've scheduled some studio time, and I mean, one of those things. It's once again, I refer back to Roger Miller. You won't really know until the cat comes out dragging all those little babies out. Then you'll know. Oh, it must be ready.
Who's producing the album this time?
We're not sure yet. Anson, I don't know what he's got going on. His schedule is so busy these days. I don't know if Anson's going to be able to do it this time. We're talking about taking all the guys and going out to Virginia and recording there, where the record company is in what is it? I think maybe it's in Raleigh. No, it's not in Raleigh. I'm watching too much Andy Griffiths. Anyway, it's up there. It's in the state of Virginia. Anyway, so we haven't really decided yet. Right now we're just demoing some stuff so the record company can get an idea of what we're doing, and let them know that we're not just sitting around smoking pot and drinking, and or at least if we're doing that, we're getting some stuff done.
I was thinking about back in the Schooners days, Terry playing
Yes.
bass back there then, and is Terry still with you?
No, Terry's dropped out for a while. He's got family issues, so he's on call when I need him. But yeah, I mean, I hate it, and he was nearly crying when he came to me and said, "Look, man, I want to drop out. Got some family issues." So, but it's okay. I mean, anytime he wants to come back, he can. Whenever I can get a slot for him. But yeah, he's a great bass player. The guy's an unbelievable jazz player. He showed me a bunch of stuff on guitar that I never knew about. Yeah, so Terry knows a lot about music theory and things like this. So he can help with when I get hung up on stuff.
Well, he's always been super nice to me, and
Oh yeah.
always talented, and I love his guitars. Well, it's an old K, isn't it? His bass?
Yes. Right.
Well, I hope to be seeing you around Dallas, Fort Worth, and around the country, and hopefully around the world.
Hopefully. Thank you, JW. Appreciate it, man.
Great seeing you, man.
Great to see you.
Love you, brother.